We begin in Ankara, Turkey, where Iran is taking center stage at the NATO summit. Less than an hour ago, President Trump said the U.S. would likely launch more strikes again tonight in Iran after Trump said it was a waste of time dealing with Tehran. Take a listen to some of his comments.
They are behaving very badly, as they have for 47 years. And, we hit them hard last night. They launched a couple of drones and one rocket, one missile, and at ships, because they were in the strait, which they have every right to be. And so we hit them very hard last night, very, very hard. Probably hit them hard again tonight. I'll give them a little warning, we're going to hit them hard tonight.
CBS News senior White House correspondent Weija Jiang joins us now from our Washington bureau. Weija, you were following the president's remarks earlier. Where do you think this leaves negotiations? I mean, he really gave another warning to Iran. And do you think that we could see a return to full-fledged hostilities?
Well, the president essentially said that, the memorandum of understanding that the negotiators were working off of is over. But he also stopped short of saying that the entire ceasefire was over when he was explicitly asked during a pseudo press conference that he just held. And so hopefully we'll get more clarity about what that means and whether it does mean a return to full-scale hostilities. But it's worth noting that he also mentioned the negotiators and said if they wanted to keep talking, that they could. So it's very murky because it makes sense that the president is very angry right now because the Strait of Hormuz, as he mentioned, was under attack with Iran going after commercial vessels. And we know that is a pain point for the president because it is impacting prices here at home. And so we've seen this before where he will use extremely heated language and rhetoric to make his point. And I think his point here to Iran is to stop those attacks. Whether, that is enough is to be seen because, again, we got here after escalation by Iran in the Strait.
The other thing, Weija, the president delivered those remarks on Iran seated next to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. President Trump expressed confidence that Ukraine and Russia could reach a deal. But again, this war has dragged on for 4 years. It is now our 5th month of the war with Iran. Every day, it feels like the president says either a deal with Iran is coming or a deal between the Russians and Ukrainians is coming. What else did he have to say around that potentiality?
So what really stuck out to me with regard to this other conflict was that the president addressed Zelensky's ask for expediting Patriot missiles, which is an air defense system that Ukraine says they really need in order to sustain this conflict. And the president said that he would, essentially talk to the company that makes these missiles and that they would somehow license it to Ukraine so that they could build them on their own. And the president said, then you wouldn't have to wait. You could build them in 2 to 3 months, and the company would teach you how to produce them, and then you could just build all these missiles. But, he also said he hasn't told the company that yet. So we have reached out to understand the feasibility of this and whether the company has heard from the administration, has heard this idea before, or if this was just a way for the president to essentially say, no, we are not going to expedite those systems. Vlad and Adriana.
All right, Weija, thank you so much.
Let's bring in CBS News national security contributor Sam Vinograd. Sam, we heard the president tell President Zelensky that the U.S. is going to give them license to make some Patriot missiles themselves. That appeared to be news to President Zelensky. This after the president mistook President Zelensky for President Putin in taking a question from a reporter. So what would be the significance of that for Ukraine to be able to build? In other words, the United States would have to share that Patriot missile technology with the Ukrainians. What would that mean for their ability to wage war against Russia?
Well, Vlad, certainly that's quite useful in the medium to long term as Ukraine wants to defend itself from Russian attacks if and when this war does end. But to be very clear, building Patriot interceptors takes time. What Ukraine needs right now is for the United States to prioritize the delivery of Patriot interceptors that are already in production to get to Ukraine as soon as possible. They don't need a open-ended promise that at some point they'll get technology so that they can build them themselves. That's great. But right now, what Ukraine needs is actual Patriot interceptors because they are suffering direct attacks from Russian missiles into their capital. I have family there right now. Folks are dying each night because they're running low on these interceptors and cannot stop Russian missiles from hitting the capital. So while I'm sure Volodymyr Zelensky was happy to hear that perhaps at some juncture the U.S. could share this technology, what Zelensky is hoping to walk away with is a promise that these Patriot interceptors that are already in production will get to Ukraine sometime soon.
And Sam, as you know, the president's comments on Iran have really overshadowed these NATO talks and taken a lot of the thunder away from other news that has been made, including on Iran. Today, when he was sitting with President Zelensky, President Trump called Iranian leaders cuckoo. Earlier, he called them scum. He said that this ceasefire deal is dead. What is the latest that you are hearing on the status of the potential ceasefire, if it exists at all?
Well, this ceasefire, which has never really been a ceasefire, it's been a cessation of major hostilities. This ceasefire and the memorandum of understanding that outlined it is clearly not in operation. President Trump, during his press conference with Zelensky, did foreshadow additional attacks this evening, and he did really give a nod to the fact that these additional attacks could strike a broader range of targets, various infrastructure, for example. Now, some of the infrastructure that he outlined, if the U.S. does attack that infrastructure, could be, in fact, a war crime. But he did signal that there could be a further escalation in U.S. military operations against Iran over the coming hours and days. At the same time, of course, we should expect that Iran will escalate its attacks as well against military facilities in the region, and they could seek to activate their proxies globally. So we're at a very tenuous point between the United States and Iran over the coming hours.
All right, Sam, thank you so much. For more on the situation with Iran, we are now joined by senior CBS News national security correspondent Charlie D'Agata. Charlie, as you know more than any of us, we've had plenty of flare-ups in fighting between the U.S. and Iran during this memorandum of understanding. Is this different?
Yeah, Adriana, that's a great place to start because this is a lot different. Because it seems the conversations that we've had, in the past weeks and months, ceasefire violation, ceasefire violation. This was next level. U.S. officials that I spoke to overnight said this was on a scale of 8 times the amount of strikes that they launched in the last serious round of strikes, right, which was 10 days ago. 8 times that. What were the targets? 80 targets were hit, the usual suspects. Air defense systems, command and control networks, radar sites along that Strait of Hormuz. They released some of those images overnight. They attacked a number of small boats. 80 strikes, although CENTCOM said they hit more than 60 of those boats. And we're learning once again that Iran retaliated. They took aim at U.S. facilities and bases in Kuwait and Bahrain as they had done before. So what we have witnessed in the past 24, 36 hours is on a much different scale of the tit-for-tat attacks that we have seen. And we just heard this from our colleague Imtiaz Tayyab, spoke to Iranian government officials who say that this is a serious violation of the Memorandum of Understanding. As you already heard, President Trump said they're ready to strike again. They might strike again. Now, when you speak to CENTCOM, they say, are you getting ready to strike again? They said, well, we're going to defer you to the White House. They're not going to project their military plans. But we are certainly facing an intensity and an increase in fighting and attacks and counterattacks and retaliation since Iran opened fire on 3 ships in the Strait of Hormuz.
All right. Our U.S. forces, Charlie, from your understanding, the forces that are in the region, are they in a position and ready to return to this all-out war campaign that we saw at the beginning of the launch of this war?
Yes. I asked that direct question today because Secretary Hegseth, Defense Secretary Hegseth, said a few weeks ago that when they pressed pause, right, when the MOU is being discussed, they said there will be no pullback. of U.S. forces there. And there are still around 50,000 U.S. forces in that region. But in terms of like the military assets, you got the Abraham Lincoln, probably 10 destroyers. There are a number of interceptors that are still in place, and they would have been reloading and repositioning as this is going on. But it's also worth noting that when you have these kind of forward postured military assets, you get destroyers and you've got aircraft carriers, the intensity in a conflict is much more than if it was, say, sailing off the coast of the Pacific or, you know, the Pacific coast off San Diego or whatever. If you're in a conflict zone, then you have a heightened state of readiness. And that also means force protection. So you've got aircraft flying all around that. You've got refuelers, et cetera. So they're not necessarily dropping munitions, but they are very active, making sure that they're keeping an eye on what they've got and ready to launch. And they have been in that position for months now. And that is going to draw some fatigue on U.S. military personnel and materiel and the aircraft and the airframes and everything else that it takes to run a military operation of this measure.
So U.S. troops have remained on alert in the region. Charlie D'Agata, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's turn now to CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio, who joins us from our London newsroom. Ramy, let's talk about the Iranian perspective. What do you think their positioning is right now at this moment?
Right. Well, you know, first off, there's concern across the region that this would spell the end of that memorandum of understanding, as it has been something more of a cessation of hostilities more than any kind of a peace deal. But what we're seeing right now, especially with the threat from President Trump saying that the U.S. will probably hit Iran again tonight, there is the idea here that they will hunker down, that the Iranian government will hunker down here. And the Iran analysts I've been speaking to today, they said that they expect more strikes from the U.S. until and unless there is an agreement on who controls the Strait of Hormuz. And we've been seeing from Iran, just most recently in the statement that just came out a few minutes ago, that they are trying to make sure that they have the leverage. That is the word right now that they're using. They have the leverage over the Strait of Hormuz, that they have sovereignty, that they have control. One of the experts that I did speak to, Aaron David Miller, who has been a Mideast policy advisor to both Republican and Democratic administrations, he came out and he criticized this White House, President Trump, saying that this is the reason, that he is the reason that the ceasefire with Iran looks to be over. Take a listen.
You know, no one should be surprised. Flawed military campaign produces flawed memorandum of understanding, produces flawed process of implementation. Look, the Iranians are emboldened. They're determined to maintain their control and leverage over the straits. Three outcomes. Number one, the president orders the military to go back to major conflict. Number two, they somehow turn this around and get serious about negotiating. And number three, we live in a no war, no peace situation, which is where I think we're going here.
U.S. CENTCOM said that it struck 80 targets in Iran. Do you think this kind of striking, this kind of pummeling, will actually get Iran, the regime, to do what the White House wants?
I really don't. I think that's been one of the faulty assumptions from the beginning. I mean, February 28th, April 8, right? You had the combined power of the world's most powerful military, the U.S., combined with the region's most powerful military, the Israeli Defense Forces. And not only is Iran's calculations haven't changed, but they survived with leverage and with much of their offensive missile capacity and drone capacity still intact. So no, I don't think that's going to bring about a fundamental change in this regime's calculation.
Feeling there, as you heard, is that both the U.S. and Iran will hunker down. The question now is what could make either side blink. I'm just looking at the price of Brent crude right now. It is up by more than 5%. It has been here ever since President Trump uttered those words that the ceasefire is over. But before all of this, in the past 24 hours, U.S. and Iran talks, those technical talks, were expected to start up after tomorrow. Tomorrow is the final day of the funeral of Iran's late supreme leader. But again, the president warned that the U.S. will strike again tonight. So basically, we have hours left until that may or may not happen.
All right, Ramy Inocencio from our London newsroom, thank you so much.